Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. You're here because, like us, you believe that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating consciousness through sport only matters if it actually helps you to compete at your highest level. We created this show to empower your performance with the wisdom and techniques of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Okay, so today's guest is a priest, Zen Master, accomplished author, and professor at the University of Wisconsin Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, who also holds a doctorate in clinical psychology. In 1982, he founded the International Zen Dojo of Wisconsin to bring the deep embodied training of Zen to present and future generations. As an instructor, his ability to draw a seamless bridge between the art of Japanese archery and Zen makes him a sought-after teacher for anyone in pursuit of enhanced physical performance, psychological evolution, and spiritual awakening. He has also cultivated a belief in the power of technology to enhance our understanding and training of the processes at work through the spiritual practices of Zen with his development of the Hara meter. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, Dr. Ken Kushner. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Well, thank you. And let me say the pleasure is mine. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So let's go for it. I'm flattered by the introduction.
That's great. It was a lot of fun preparing for this episode. So there are, in a usual fashion, a lot of places we could start. Where I really would love to kind of orient our conversation is if you could share what allowed you to make the transition or evolution from martial art as a physical practice to a spiritual way.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And let me give the history with this. So I got into martial arts really second time in my life. I was in my early 20s and I was in graduate school and I studied a form of karate. And as we would say in those days, I was really into it. So I trained, I thought, very hard until I was probably weeks away from getting my black belt, which meant a great deal for me then. At that point, though, I was introduced to actually a fellow graduate student, a gentleman from Hawaii, a little younger than I, who started to tell me about his teacher in Hawaii. They have a temple there where they do both martial arts and Zen training. It's really a Zen temple. They do martial arts training, which I've learned over the years is really pretty unusual in this day and age. So he invited me. He was starting a Zen training group or a group training this. He invited me to join him. And at that point I said, no, I got too much on my plate, So the next year this came up again. And I said, okay, I have the time now. So he showed me, and you have a martial arts background, from what I understand, correct? Aikido.
Correct.
So he showed me a two-person sword form. It's called the Hojo Kata. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's not all that well known. There are two people. They use I brought one for illustration, a big wooden sword called a bukto, heavy one. And there are basically movements mirroring each other. It's divided in 4 parts, one for each season. So spring, summer, fall, winter. And with this is very, very deep abdominal breathing. If you were to look at it, you think, well, this is where Darth Vader picked it up.
Right.
I watched this and basically did a 180. And I said to myself, I want that. I want to learn this. So I said, okay, how do I sign up? He said, well, you have to train in Zen to do this. Well, I was a child of the 60s. I knew a lot of people were into Zen. I didn't pay them a whole lot of attention. Alan Watts posters were all over the place and so forth. So, okay. So we started to sit Zazen, and he gave me basic instruction. Zazen is seated Zen, what people call Zen meditation. And he said, you have to breathe with your Hara. Okay. Well, what's that? Well, actually, I knew the term. I knew what Hara is from my previous experience in karate.
Sure.
I thought I knew the term, I should say. It's the lower abdomen, and then you breathe with it somehow. And he said, okay, you breathe your heart out. So, okay, all right, did it. Nope, couldn't do it. And nope, couldn't do it. And this went on for a long, long time. So, but let me just backtrack a little. Did you have any karate experience?
I do. So my background is in Kempo karate, actually.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so you know Sanshin kata?
I'm not familiar with that one actually off the top of my head, but go for it.
Sanshin is a very unusual one. First of all, it uses an hourglass stance where your toes are sort of pigeoned like that, and you do deep breathing like this, very slow. When I had learned that in karate, and once I started to do zazen, I really learned, well, I learned how to make some interesting noises when I did that. Like I learned to scrunch my face up and go, but there's no way I was doing any kind of deep breathing.
Right.
So then I said, whoa, this is interesting. So in my Zen experience, and this went on for, I would be embarrassed to say if I really knew how long it was in retrospect. We're going back 40 years. So, you know, pretty serious. And the person in charge, in our tradition, we call the Jiki Jitsu, and he gets up periodically, no nonsense, and he carries this stick. This is actually a miniature version of it. It's about 3 times the size. He'll walk like that, and then he can volunteer you. He bows in front of you, and you go forward like that, expose your shoulder, and he goes, whack, whack, whack. Other side, whack, whack, whack. You can request it or you can be volunteered. I was volunteered a whole lot because I had a lot of trouble with this breathing. And then they give an instruction and you whisper, breathe with your heart off, or set your heart up. And I go, all right. And I tried all kinds of things. Nothing worked. So this went on a long, long time. And I got very frustrated. In retrospect, I'm sort of amazed I stuck this out. But I did. But then one day, something happened. And I've told this story a lot, but it means a lot to me. And I can remember it really as if it happened yesterday. I was late to training. We did evening sitting. I used to have to drive about an hour or 15 minutes, hour and a half to get there. And I had a terrible day at work. I'd gotten into a fight with my boss, and I was really in a bad state when I got in the car, and I just kind of stewed on it for this hour and a half and got in, ran and changed my clothes. And I told people in the changing room what had happened. You know, I'm busted. Okay. And they were looking at me. Yeah. And as I worked to a crescendo, all of a sudden, pop. It was the best way I can describe it. And it felt like my abdomen dropped. And then all these changes happened. My center of gravity was different. My breathing was slowed down, and my mind was clear. So then I remember as I walked down the hall to go to sit, I said to myself, oh, I found my Hara. So that's what did it in terms of it made me realize that there is a dimension well above what I was exposed to in my martial arts training. That was truly a profound spiritual dimension. And the key to it was Hara. And I'll say more. There's a lot I can say on this, but
please.
In some ways, I never walked back from that instant in time. My body changed really permanently, not perfectly, but my training from that point has been developing that from that instance. Now, my experience is really unusual. And talking to people over the years, and I've taught a lot of people, I can think maybe 1 or 2 people say they have that discrete an experience. For most people, it's just gradual. You notice comes and goes. But for me, it was wham, and I was hit on the head. Then, one of the most significant things I noticed, not necessarily that day, although I did see inklings in it, and that's the intimate connection between breathing. We'll call it Hara breathing. And I can talk more. I'm prepared to talk about that in some depth.
Great.
And what goes on in your mind. So when you talk about consciousness, from the standpoint of my tradition of Zen, it is all driven or created. There are different words you can use by breathing buttress with posture. So the idea of changing your thoughts or clearing your thoughts without changing your breathing, to me, is foreign. I actually don't. I'm so inculcated in this. I don't understand quite how it's done. Let me just say a couple other things.
Please.
The tradition of Zen that I study and I now teach, I've learned is very unusual. I wasn't shopping around for a spiritual teacher when I started this 40 years ago. It's like they kind of found me, or I found them. I don't know how to put it. But our tradition is very unusual in this day and age, in that our tradition, and we're called Chozenji, and I can talk about that, our main temples in Hawaii, really talks about three pillars, three legs of our training. And we use Japanese terms to explain them. Zen Ken Sho. So Zen refers to Zazen, the process of Zen meditation.
Okay.
Also some temple practices such as chanting, daily work. Ken, as you know, means sword in Japanese and refers generically to the martial arts. So in our system, we teach a number of martial arts, Hojo being one. I specialize in Kyudo, which is Japanese archery. If you're interested, I can tell you how I got there. And Sho means writing, as in calligraphy. And that refers generically to the fine arts. So we do Zen, martial arts, and fine arts as our complete package. And the justification for that, or the reason for that, is that the same principles of breathing, posture, and I would add concentration run throughout them. It's a lot.
So there is this really interesting dynamic right now going on around mindfulness, right? And one of the things that is really fascinating, Ken, and I read this in your book, and I would love for you to share some of the evolution that you've had as well, just in seeing maybe the differences and similarities. The difference between, say, mindfulness and concentration, or just what those states, how those can be looked at as different pieces of the same whole.
Okay, and that's a good question, but let me give a caveat.
Sure.
In that I do not teach mindfulness, nor do I have any experience other than, one day I was at work and someone was doing, something like that.
Sure.
And I want to be very careful not to set up a straw person with this. And I have a lot of respect for it, but mindfulness meditation is not what we do. As a matter of fact, in the whole of my Zen training, and my teacher, Tanai Roshi, was very traditional. Although he was American-born, he was Japanese-American from Hawaii. I don't think I ever heard him mention the term mindfulness. With the exception is, you talk about right mindfulness as being a stage without going into the scriptures in any depth. We use the term Samadhi, and they overlap. And my guess is this is what you're referring to. So Samadhi is a term. The same with Hara. Hara is a similar term in that there's no good single English translation. You'll see it as concentration. You'll see it as awareness. You'll see it as alert concentration. One that I particularly like is absorption. That can, when you are so concentrated in something, you're absorbed to such a degree that you lose the self-other boundary. And my guess is elite athletes are very aware of this as a phenomenon. But we call that Samadhi. And you can think of it as a continuum, in a sense that probably everyone has an idea of what Samadhi is. And I think a lot of times when people are talking about flow experiences, they're talking about some kind of samadhi. But then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm going up, but it gets deeper, okay? More and more intense, to the point what we call absolute samadhi is when you really lose the distinction between self and other. That's the precursor for the true Zen experience, what we call seeing into your true nature. It sets the stage for that. Now, what's the difference between samadhi and mindfulness? Again, I think there's a lot of overlap. But I can tell you from what I've read and what I've been told, in mindfulness, basic mindfulness instructions is that if you have a sensation or a thought, you note it and you put it away.
Right.
In samadhi meditation, you neither note it, you just see through it. Okay, so there's no cognitive issue with that. The first day I met the man who became my Zen teacher, Tana Roshi, and he was talking about this. He was talking about samadhi. And there were ceiling fans in the building, those old-fashioned ceiling fans. And he said, samadhi is like when you're looking through a spinning propeller. If you fixate on one of the blades, you don't see much. Your kind of mind gets whipped around. But if you kind of step back a little, you don't fixate, you see through it. That's what samadhi does with thought. So you see through your thought, or in Zen terminology as well, you do not get attached to the thought. And that's samadhi. Now, the difference that I see, forget the phenomena of mindfulness and samadhi. The practice of meditation differs, at least as we practice in my tradition, is that I'll draw on two Zen sayings here. One is that you cannot wash off blood with blood. And we take that to mean that it's very difficult to control your thoughts with other thoughts.
Yeah.
So I say, I'm going to keep a clear mind. I'm going to keep a clear mind. And I realize I might be stereotyping things here. You're still caught up with thoughts. The other saying that relates to this is we say we enter the mind through the body. So we control our thoughts with our breathing and posture. And it's through this Hara breathing that generates the samadhi. Now, from what I've seen of mindfulness instruction, so again, pardon me, mindfulness people out there, I don't mean disrespect. The physicality of controlling thoughts with the body, I'm not seeing in it. And I think that my tradition of Zen is sort of an outlier as far as that's concerned. One of my good Zen colleagues says, Zen training is quintessentially physical in nature. It's kind of like digging ditches. You're just going back to this breathing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I see mindfulness and would you call concentration? I would call samadhi.
It's a perfect segue because the recurring thought that struck me is just this notion that we don't have to separate spiritual development from physical action and from physical manifestation. And I think a lot of times we, especially in the realm of sport, it becomes this kind of quarantined world, right? Spiritual growth, even if we talk about it, even if we talk about this evolution, it becomes something separate from physical action, whereas it doesn't have to be with this particular lens. And that was that was a very energizing shift to make.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. To me, at this stage, I'm 40 plus years, 40 years down the road on this. For me to try I will go first to the physicality of things, is what I'm saying. That's first and foremost. And that's the development that became so critical.
What do you think is most challenging, whether it's for the students that you work with or just in your own evolution as you reflect to to help us make that shift? It's similar to the question we started with, right? Which is how do we make that transition into seeing something like martial arts as a spiritual path? But what allows us to see and experience and kind of embody that spirit in action?
Okay. I'm prejudiced.
Yeah.
Okay. To me, the key behind this is Hara.
Hmm.
In that the challenge that I see in my students is to develop that. And that was my challenge. That's what I had. I'm on this big campaign now of spreading the word about Hara. And I appreciate this opportunity. I would like to have it become a household word as it is in Japan. So let me say that maybe this is a good segue a little bit down the road to talk about what is Hara breathing.
Sure.
But let me say that when I have a prospective student, they want to study Zen and want to study archery. I don't teach Judo, Japanese archery, separate from Zen. My students have to define themselves as Zen students first. They want to do Judo or not, fine, but they can't do Judo without Zen. So I'd like to talk to them one-on-one, just let's feel each other out, and I want to make sure that someone's in the right place. And have a sense of that, then I will I'll give instruction in our method of Zazen, and then we'll demonstrate what Hara breathing is with that. Now, in my many years of teaching this, there are very, very, very few people who are able to do this when they come in. And that includes people with very, very much experience in yoga, in martial arts, high level ranking martial arts people, yoga. And I was really surprised over the years. Now, certainly there have been exceptions to that. And I have some students now who, one with a martial arts background who just came, he was already set. And another woman grew up in a yoga family. I mean, she's doing yoga since she was 3 or something like that. And she can do all kinds of things. The exceptions have been musicians, and particularly wind instrument players and voice people, opera. Really, those are the exceptions. So can I talk about what Hara breathing is? Because
Please.
That's sort of the underpinning, and you're asking how people make the shift.
Yeah.
The answer is going to be with that. I would say don't do it with a thought. Then we're back in the conundrum of washing off blood with blood.
Right.
So you can do it with your breathing. So I like to describe this in terms of 3 stages or levels of breathing. Probably everyone out there in this audience knows the first 2. So the first is thoracic or chest breathing. So in that, you engage the muscles of the chest, expand without going into in depth the physiology of breathing. Other than to say the main muscle of inspiration, by inspiration I mean breathing in, is the diaphragm. Diaphragm sits, right below the ribs. It's a dome-shaped muscle. It has cartilage on top. It has muscle on the bottom. When it contracts, it goes down like a piston, creates negative pressure in the thoracic cavity, and air comes in. Breathing out is a little more complicated. But in chest breathing, you're using the musculature up here, okay? The second level, everyone's going to know, is called abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing, AKA belly breathing. I actually don't like that term, but so be it. And in that, you have a lot more engagement of the lower abdomen. It works like a bellows. When you breathe in, it goes out. And when you breathe out, it goes in. So it's kind of like, actually what's happening among other things is when you breathe out by contracting your abdominal muscles, it squeezes the viscera, the guts, pushes up against the diaphragm, pushes it back up. Diaphragmatic breathing, abdominal breathing is much healthier. It's much more efficient than thoracic breathing. And there are old Japanese studies where they did x-rays. This is predates MRI and stuff like that. But what we do is the third level, and that's where the challenge is for most people. And that's Hara or Tanden breathing. So you know the term Tanden. Tanden is the imaginary point. You can say roughly 1 inch below the navel, the 1 point in Aikido. Hara in Japanese literally refers to the lower abdomen. Think of the Tanden as contained in it. Now, in that, it starts out like abdominal breathing. So I breathe in, goes out, and I breathe out, it stays out. Then I breathe in, it stays out. And then I breathe out, it stays in. So the lower abdomen is always expanded. Okay. Now, I brought a visual aid. May I?
Please.
Can you read the dial?
Yes.
All right, good. Let me turn this. So let me introduce you to the Hara meter. You see here, I'm going to turn this. I'm going to wrap this around my abdomen, my lower abdomen, like so. Easier said than done. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I put this right in my tanden like this. And I'm going to pull it tight and tie it in a knot here. You can see this. And I'm going to pump up. There's a bladder inside that's going to translate into the meter. I'll turn it back so you can see the meter in a minute.
Sure.
Okay. So what this does is this measures relative expansion and contraction of my lower abdomen. Let's see if I can take this off. So, yeah. Oh, all right. That's much better. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Good. All right. So let me just show how this works with the 3 levels of breathing. Okay. So again, this just looks at relative contraction here. Now to start out, I'm gonna create a baseline. I'm gonna intentionally contract my abdominal muscles like I'm doing a crunch. Okay. Then I'm going to start thoracic breathing. Look at the meter. I cannot see the meter here, even though it's on my screen. My eyes aren't good enough.
Right.
So I'll raise my hand when I breathe in. Okay. You should not have seen movement in the dial. All right. So we're going to go to level 2. This is abdominal breathing, also known as diaphragmatic breathing. And again, just to set a baseline, I'm going to contract my lower abdomen. I'm going to take the breath in. The dial should go up, and I'm going to exhale. And again. Okay, so what you should have seen is that dial goes up when inhale, goes down. Okay, now we're going to I will do Hara breathing. I'm going to start out the same way. I'm contracting my lower abdomen like a crunch. I'm going to take that breath in. And I'm going to exhale. Inhale again. Then exhale. Relax here.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you should have seen is that when I inhale, that first time, it went up to a certain level. I asked you to note that. We'll call that my set point.
Right.
And then pretty much it should stay around there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is what we trained to do. And that's what I had that breakthrough. Well, my breakthrough wasn't even that big. I couldn't even do abdominal breathing very, very well at that point. So in everything that we do in my lineage, Zazen, chanting, working in the garden, martial arts, fine arts.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. So back to your question is how do you make the transition? To me, this is how you do it to develop this ability. Let me say, I come to see Hara, the phenomenon of Hara, as the point of intersection between the physical, psychological, and spiritual dimensions of the human experience.
Mm.
And you cannot separate these out fully. There's a book, my second or third audiovisual aid. Is this book here? Are you familiar with this? Hara,
I'm not.
of Man.
Okay. Yep.
And it's written by a German psychologist who, I think in the 60s, well, the book was published, I think in the 60s. He got interested in the phenomenon of Hara and wrote this book on it. There isn't that much that's written on Hara in the English language or probably Western languages, but everything refers to this. This is the source. And he has very, very interesting chapter on Hara in Japanese language. So expressions like in English, we'll say someone lost their head.
Sure.
What does that mean? They lost their, they're running around and they're screaming and they're angry. In Japanese, they'll say that person's Hara rose.
Hmm.
In English, we'll say someone has a big heart. In Japanese, there's an expression, that person has a big Hara. And that means that they are generous and bountiful. Kind of means the same thing. When I got into this years ago, I thought this was metaphorical, just as like the person does not lose his head when he flies off the handle. But in fact, you lose your Hara. If your Hara is set, you're not going to be carried away like that.
Mm.
Then there are also sayings that have to do with character development and maturity. So without, what's a good one? To say that someone has finished his or her Hara means that that person is a mature individual. There's another saying that the person without Hara, the person who hasn't finished his Hara isn't fit to lead. So it means that there's wisdom and maturity go with this. And again, I no longer see this as metaphoric. This is what we're training to do. So let me just recap this. You have the physical side of Hara I've talked about. The spiritual side, that's the development of Samadhi. That is your flow experience. And my concern when I read a lot of the flow literature, people talk about that as it's something that happens to you rather than something you create.
Yeah. And
that's by creating your own Samadhi through your Hara breathing, you are creating your own flow state that you can take with you. And then the third dimension is spiritual, psychological is that character development side I was talking about. Okay.
So there is an interesting connection, and maybe one of the the pieces that would be really important to bridge for some of our audience is this idea, as athletes, we are constantly, it seems like even still, taught to exhale as we exert ourselves, right? There's this natural exertion that occurs. And I would love for you to share how the Hara breathing works and is interwoven into the steps necessary for archery and for the martial art practices as well.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, we still do exhale on moves that require power. Okay. For example, and if you want, I might be able to demonstrate this. The release in archery is at the end of the day powered by the exhalation and a Hara exhalation. Sword cuts in Kendo, I can't speak about Aikido, but my guess is you're going to exhale as you're throwing. Certainly in Judo, one of the things is if your Hara isn't set, if you're doing abdominal breathing, your center of gravity is going up and down. So in a student, I remember this back from my martial arts days. Or my karate days. So a canny opponent will notice when you're up and then you're more vulnerable. But where we differ from, I think, most of the Western conceptualization of exhaling, let me see if I can demonstrate this.
Sure.
I have this instrument here. It's called a Hara bow. It's a heavy weight. Okay. Now, we use this for Hara development. Okay. Now, or actually, here's a better example. The average person, you give them a weight. I don't know what this weighs. So I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to tighten my abdominals. Okay. And someone with Hara development will do this. So I'm actually expanding my lower abdomen like this versus, and that actually is a different way of bracing your core. Now, one advantage of when you are setting your Hara, you have to relax your upper body to do it. You have to take as much unnecessary tension out of your upper body as you can. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, and what came to mind for me is this notion that we hear the term belly breathing, we hear the term deep breath, and what tends to happen, at least I know for me, is that I tend to think just in and out with my belly, right? In and out. And if I'm not conscious of separating what my body is doing per se from what the breath and the way the breath is moving, there is this natural tendency to just allow that in and out to occur, which, as you said, for an athlete, that shifts my center of gravity, right? That changes what's happening in my body from a physiological performance stance that I need to be conscious of.
Yeah. Let me say two things about that. From the standpoint of an athlete, an elite athlete, there are a couple issues with that. Number one, by doing this, you should be able to create flow. Now, if in your particular sport that's important, this goes with that. Okay. The second is this is a power source, and if you go back to the Taoist alchemy, this circulates qi in the body. So that is in Taoist alchemy. They say that the chest is the realm of fire, and the abdomen is the realm of water. If you bring the water to the fire, it puts it out. So in other words, if you take the qi out of your lower abdomen, but if you bring the fire to the water, you get steam, and that steam is a qi. So let's see. The question you asked was, did I answer it?
You did, Ken, and actually, this tees up a different thought that I'd love to pull on a little bit. So this notion of qi and so this term kiai is something that would be really strong to share what that is and its role within both your training and just at a larger perspective, it's connection to chi and to that energy, because you've mentioned chanting already. I think there is this really energizing, intuitive understanding that athletes and coaches have around vibration and sound and connection to power, but using these tools to cultivate that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So we use it in my tradition. We use the term ki instead of chi.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't know exactly, but ki is the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese character chi, and I, as you know, is harmony. So it's being harmonizing with ki. So you can look at it as a manifestation of ki or chi. And it's cycle, the best way, another one of those terms doesn't have good English definition, translation. It's psychophysical energy. It is the energy that you feel both with another person and another thing going all kinds of ways. And it has tremendous impact on people. And I write in my book, this time when I was knocked on my can, actually I was knocked on my front by hearing monks chant.
Yeah.
And even though I might be prone to tripping, that's not what happened then. So my Zen teacher was a musician. He was a music teacher. He taught clarinet. They said it was the only, in high school level, and they said it was the only high school where the tough guys were in band. You know? So, and he would use this analogy. He said that when kids start music lessons, whatever, you give them a violin or whatever, in fourth grade, third grade, whatever, and they start, playing, they make this awful noise, okay? But then if they stick it out, it gets mellower and mellower. And then, there are different turning points back to professional, musicians. They get a very mellow tone. So you give a professional violinist, the same violin, he'll have a much better tone. But what happens? You're really refining your body so that it resonates with the violin. Okay, so it's not just the violin's resonating. Your things that you're doing. We find this in Kyudo. We listen to the sound of the bow and feel the vibration of it on release. Okay, and he would say that this is what we do in Zazen. We are learning to vibrate our bodies differently. And we do this through Zazen. And chanting also is another way to do it. So chanting, the way we got, you want a demonstrations? So
sure.
The way we chant in the original languages. This is doing it again. There we go. It's the way I'm sitting. So let's see if we can do this right here. We emphasize long exhalations. We do that when we meditate, when we do Zazen and this. So I'll do this, and then I'll give a variation that athletes can try.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to take my breath in. Namu Samandan. Koto nano arashi koto shaso no nanto jito en yaki unum shifura hara shifura shisusa chichusa shushiri so aja se shiya shiri so moko namu samandan. This will go on like that. And if I relax it like that. Now you can do it, and this would be, matter of fact, we will do this as kind of quick training if people don't know the chants. And
sure.
You can chant vowels. You can actually chant anything. So you go, okay, I'm going to start. Direct your attention to the meter there.
Yeah.
Take a breath in. I'm going to go. I'll do the vowel sounds. And so on. or you can count numbers. The important thing is you have something you're focusing your mind on, but you're bringing it up through your body, and you're doing long exhalations. And if you do this, you'll find you get more and more resonant.
Yeah.
Your body resonates. And in fact, I think we are really learning to resonate, or for maybe that's another way of saying to have our bodies vibrate differently.
There's this cycle that you just alluded to, or maybe an exchange that you just alluded to, that is really energizing and interesting to me, in this idea that when we are hearing or feeling a vibration, it isn't just a one-way transmission, right? Or vice versa, as we are stepping into these higher vibrations, it's an exchange, right? It's an energetic exchange that's occurring both ways. And that to me creates a lot of energy and a way to explain what I may feel on the football field, or in a sparring match, or in a basketball game. Like, those feelings are being exchanged both ways. That energy.
More. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And that's fundamental to, back to the Hojo Kata, that short form that started it all for me.
Sure.
It's really communication between the two at an energetic level that does it.
Ken, this has been absolutely energizing and incredible. I think the perspectives here are just, they're required for making these shifts, or at least for opening us up to what kind of shifts are in front of us if we choose to take the step forward. Before I ask my final question, where can these guys go to connect with you online?
Well, you can. My email is kkushner@wisconsinzen.org. I have a blog, haradevelopment.org, and I have videos, I have training videos, I have content on that. And then we have our dojo website, wisconsinzen.org. We have other teachers there as well. I do have an article, if you're familiar with Tricycle Magazine. It's a pan-Buddhist magazine. I have an article, I think the only first one they've ever had on Hara, will be coming out. It was supposed to be out in August, and now saying November, December. So keep an eye on that.
That's great. That's great. So, Ken, this show's called I'm the Athlete, because our goal is to understand what it takes to be the ultimate mind, body, and spirit competitor. The final question of the show is, what does being I'm the Athlete mean to you?
Okay, I'm going to say a couple things, but before I do that, let me just say the pleasure is mine. I've really enjoyed this. I knew I would, and you're a great interlocutor. So thank you.
Thank you.
What about this question? What does it mean to be an I'm the Athlete? Well, I'm going to address this in two ways. Number one, for me, it's doing things with your Hara. In that I think that Omni elite athletes, I've thought this for a long time, would have a lot to gain by doing it. For a lot of reasons. But one is, in terms of the idea of development of consciousness, I'm convinced it will help generate that flow state, which we call Samadhi. But let me say, I'm gonna come at this from another angle. In Zen, we do this training, we do Hara development, we do whatever we're going to do to develop Samadhi, to develop our understanding, so that we bring it into our daily lives. And I would encourage people to think about that. In that, for us, if you're in a pristine state when you're doing archery or whatever, yeah, that's great. Okay. The real challenge is do it when you're at work and there are people yelling at you and things are piling up. To me, that's really elite.
That is incredible, Ken. And I love that notion of being able to bring it with us wherever we are, right? Or to step into it wherever we are. That's one thing we didn't get a chance to dive into, and it's a natural extension.
Let me say one other thing. What we call this is a term that you will know, Zanshin. You're familiar with that? Remaining heart or mind. That's the continuation over time of your experience.
There is such a beauty in recognizing that it doesn't just stop in that moment. It doesn't just stop in that single play in whatever that is for you as an athlete or as a coach. Ken, thank you so much for coming on the show. Guys, please go dive deep into Ken's world and the content that he's put out, whether it's his books, his videos, the articles he's written. One of the most energizing aspects of the content that you're going to have a chance to interact with through Ken, through the work that he's done, is these tools, these practices are available to any of us, to all of us, if we're willing to put in the work and time to open ourselves up to them. And as athletes, whether it's breath, whether it's movement, whether it's concentration, we can find all these different entry points into a world of experience and to levels of performance that just transcend what we are typically allowed to consider available to us. And when you dive into Ken's world, you're going to see it's right here for you to grab. And there's a lot of different mediums and doors into that world. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching this episode of Omni Athlete. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you for watching another episode of Omni Athlete. Please go like and subscribe to our podcast. That is our goal right now, is just to build this community as big as we possibly can. And we need your help to do it. So like and subscribe, share our content, guys. If this content adds any value to your world, if it helps you perform, connect, go deeper, go wider, whatever it is that it does for you, if it provides value, all we ask is that you share our content and help grow this community. We can't accomplish our goal of elevating global consciousness through sport without you. You are an integral part of this mission and this purpose, and we need your help. So please go like, subscribe, and share our content, and continue to help us build and grow this community that is truly motivated to not just elevate consciousness, but elevate and shift the very culture of sport so that we can truly experience the athletic experience in a brand new and energizing way for so many people, guys. So thank you, and please like and subscribe. Until next time.